First, Nichloas Westcott, who's Professor of Practice in Diplomacy at SOAS, University of London, and a former British diplomat. So you have patrolled these corridors, these diplomatic channels. When we hear that the European leaders are told they must have a backbone, they are being pathetic and they'll effectively be gobbled up by a T-Rex. Professor, how do you respond? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Europe has to step up in the way that Mark Carney yesterday said that they should, that middle powers need to adjust to the fact that there is a new world, that great powers are throwing their weight around. Trump is clearly emboldened by his success in Venezuela, his what he sees as his success in Gaza, his success in Iran, and basically he thinks he can get anything he wants. And what he wants is Greenland, because he wants to make the US bigger. He wants to be the first president to enlarge the physical space of the United States with the biggest acquisition since the Louisiana Purchase. So he's emboldened, and he thinks everybody should fall into line. That said, he does face some constraint, mainly from Republicans in Congress, who actually value NATO. They know the value of alliances. Trump has never been a big fan of either multilateral organizations or alliances. He thinks America is strong enough to stand on its own. But they think otherwise. So there is some constraint on him. That means there is room for a deal whereby the US has more access to Greenland. NATO plays a bigger role in Arctic security, but it's not really what he wants. What he wants is a big flag planted in the middle of Greenland.
A whisker under 48 hours ago, we saw the position at that time of the United Kingdom through Sir Keir Starmer. Was that positioning about right, Professor? Should he have gone further?
Keir Starmer is a bit like a circus rider with a foot on two horses, and the horses are now going in different directions, and the splits are getting very uncomfortable for him. And they're going to continue to diverge. He's going to have to choose. Is he going to choose to be to mate with the T-Rex, to become a subordinate relationship to the US, or is he going to become an equal partner in Europe? Both have serious drawbacks. We're economically most dependent on Europe, we're security most dependent on the US. We don't want them to pull apart, but he himself alone is not strong enough to pull them back together. That's the message. And Mark Carney drew that conclusion. A great speech yesterday that, we're able to stand by ourselves with friends we can rely on.
So your whole life is diplomacy. You've been one. You now are a professor of practice in diplomacy. Do you subscribe to the view that if confronted by a bully, and I'm not suggesting that Trump is, but if one is confronted by a bully, you have to stand firm. You have to, if you'll pardon the language, grow a pair? Professor?
In short, yes. But you need to do so with a very real knowledge of your own strength, your own power. There's no point standing up to a bully who can crush you tomorrow. And, this is a story Mark Carney tells a story from Thucydides, the ancient Greeks, where a little island tried to stand out against Athens, Milos, and they just crushed it because they had a huge fleet and Milos had a small army. So you've got to be realistic too. But, you need to know which friends you can trust and which ones you can't. And I'm afraid the US has shifted into the category of a friend you can no longer trust.
Professor, I have enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for your time. Nichloas Westcott, a former British diplomat, Professor of Practice in Diplomacy at SOAS, University of London, 11 after 8. Listening to that is Lord Hannan, a Conservative peer, President of the Institute for Free Trade, and a contributor to today's Daily Mail, with the intro, the first paragraph reading, "Look, there's no point in dancing around this. The most powerful man in the world is as mad as a box of frogs, deranged, demented, doolally." Lord Hannan joins me now. Confronted with someone who is deranged, demented, doolally, what should a British Prime Minister, what should other leaders of European countries do? Morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, the world is, as Professor Westcott was saying just there, very different. And we need to be able to stand up for ourselves. And that means we need to have armed forces capable of global reach. And that means we need to rejig our economy. We can't carry on running our entire economy around giving more money to welfare claimants and public sector workers. That is over.
How does that feed into our conversation about Donald Trump? We then apply that money to NATO, so we don't effectively get defence on the cheap. Is that what you're saying, Lord Hannan?
Well, no, I think we need to be much more independent. We've, for a long time, bought cheap and effective off-the-shelf US procurement, and that's worked for us very well, as long as it was unthinkable that we would ever fall out.
This is through NATO, just to clarify, Daniel.
This is us, the UK.
Yeah, but
yes,
the insurance
NATO
policy
countries
that NATO effectively provided. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
I mean, let's consider the Chagos deal. I mean, how extraordinarily humiliating that it should be up to a US president whether or not we cede British territory. How have we got ourselves into a position where the only way of stopping this thing now is because Trump might not like it? I mean, we as a country, if we were serious about defense and about global influence, we would never in a million years be giving away this prime real estate, the Malta of the Indian Ocean, the most strategically located military installment in the area, and then paying for it, right? And yet we're in the position of waiting to see what mood Trump wakes up in, and that is not a sustainable position for a serious country like ours.
Let's talk a little bit about moods. In your piece in the Daily Mail, you talk about a recent visit to Washington and a rather different tone or mood among some Republicans you encountered. Tell the listeners a bit about that, if you would, Lord Hannan.
Well, I was very struck by this, that when people wanted to disagree with one of the president's policies, not even to criticize him, not even to mention him by name, they kind of look around and lower their voices in the way that I remember people doing when I was a teenager visiting countries behind the Iron Curtain, as though you know, they were worried that something would get back to this notoriously thin-skinned man. And I have to say, Congress has the power to do something about this, right? All of this madness could stop tomorrow. The Congress has the power to stop the tariffs, to take back control of trade policy, and Congress has the power, ultimately, to impeach him on grounds of mental incapacity. But the reason it won't exercise those powers is because it's full of cowards and flatterers and people who are not prepared to assert the prerogatives that were very clearly written into the Constitution for them by the Founding Fathers. Final question. You do write the Founding Fathers, quotes, knew what they were doing when they gave Congress these powers. They were obsessed with the story of how the Roman Republic had ended. Do you think he now needs to be impeached? Are you saying that his, let me just get this right, the doolaliness, the derangement and the dementia is as demented as bad as that? I mean, Nick, how else can you interpret saying, I'm so annoyed about not getting the Nobel Peace Prize that I'm going to threaten to invade an unrelated NATO country just to show you all? That is not the behaviour of a normal, sane person. We've kind of internalised this. We've got used to it. Oh, it's just Trump. He talks this way. It's saber rattling before a deal. You know, watch what he does, not what he says. But first of all, what he says when he's president of the biggest and most powerful economy in the world is a kind of deed. And second, it's not just words. You know, he is sanctioning NATO allies while pursuing a closer relationship with Russia. And anyone on the fence about this would just need to ask themselves this question. Let's suppose that the conspiracy theorists were right. Let's suppose that he really were some kind of Kremlin asset, that Putin really did have some kind of dirt on him. I don't believe that. But ask yourself this question. If that were true, what would he be doing differently? In Ukraine, in Canada, in Greenland, what would he be doing more effectively to destroy the Western alliance, of which the United States has been the chief beneficiary and exemplar? Grateful for your time. Thank you, Daniel. Now Lord Hannan, Conservative peer and President of the Institute for Free Trade. Wow. Well, you've heard a couple of verdicts there on President Trump and what we need to hear from European leaders.